Snowflakes clung to her lashes as the little girl stumbled through the silent forest, her small boots sinking deep into the drifts. At first, she thought the faint cries were the wind, but when she brushed the snow aside, her mittens struck fur, then movement. Buried beneath the ice was a wounded wolf, its ribs heaving, and pressed against her side were tiny pups, barely breathing. Why would a wild predator risk freezing to shield its young? And what would happen if the girl tried to save them? The storm had swept through the valley in the night, fierce and merciless, burying everything in a blanket of white. By morning, the village was nearly silent, the roads hidden, the rooftops hunched beneath snow so heavy it groaned with every gust of wind. For most, it was a day to stay inside, to huddle close to the fire. But for Clara, a girl no older than 10, curiosity always outweighed caution. She tugged on her worn boots, pulled her red scarf snug around her chin, and slipped into the world of snow and silence. The forest seemed endless, every branch weighed down with frost, every breath of wind rattling ice like broken glass. Clara trudged forward, dragging a stick behind her, leaving thin trails in the snow. It was then she heard it, a sound so faint, she thought at first it was her imagination, a soft whimper, muffled, almost swallowed by the cold. She froze, listening, and there it was again. Not the moan of wind, but something alive. Her heart pounded as she pushed through the drifts, following the sound. The snow gave way suddenly, and beneath her hands, she felt warmth where there should have been only ice. She scraped with her mittens, frantic now, until the shape revealed itself. A wolf, half buried, its fur clotted with snow, its golden eyes dull but alert. It did not lunge or growl. It only breathed, shallow and weak, and pressed against its flank, curled in a trembling cluster, were 3 tiny pups, their cries faint as whispers. Clara's breath caught. She had heard the stories all her life. Wolves were dangerous, merciless, the enemy of man. Yet nothing about this moment felt like the stories. The animal's body was curved protectively around its young, its frame shaking with cold, but refusing to move away. Even half frozen, it shielded them. The little girl sank to her knees in the snow, her small fingers brushing gently against one of the pups. It was so light she thought it might vanish in her hand. She looked into the wolf's eyes, and in them she did not see fury. She saw a plea, and in that instant, Clara made her choice. She would not leave them. Clara's hands shook as she brushed more snow away from the wolf's body. The cold bit through her mittens, but she barely noticed. All she could think of was the shallow rise and fall of the animal's ribs, the weak cries of the pups huddled against her. The wolf's golden eyes never left her face. They were clouded with exhaustion, but not with hatred. It was as though the beast knew it could no longer fight, and perhaps that it didn't need to. The girl looked around the forest, her heart racing. The village was at least a mile behind her, and there was no one else in sight. Snow muffled every sound. Even the wind seemed distant. She was alone with a predator everyone feared, a mother clinging to her young, trapped beneath ice and cold. "Don't worry," Clara whispered, her breath clouding in the air. "I'll help you." She didn't know if the animal understood, but saying the words gave her courage. The snow was heavy around the wolf's back legs, pressing them down like stone. Clara dug furiously, scooping handfuls away. The cold burned her fingers even through her mittens, but she kept scraping until the wolf was free enough to shift. It tried to rise but collapsed with a soft whine, its body too weak. Clara's chest tightened at the sound. She had heard dogs whine before, but this was different. This was the cry of a mother who feared not for herself, but for the tiny lives at her side. The pups squirmed weakly, their fur damp and clumped with frost. Clara cupped one in her hands, holding it close to her scarf. The little creature shivered against her chest, its heartbeat a faint flutter against her skin. She glanced at the wolf, who watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was no snarl, no baring of teeth, only trust or desperation. Clara knew she couldn't carry them all, not at once. Her arms were small, her legs already tired from trudging through the drifts. But if she left them here, they would freeze before she returned. She looked back toward the path she had taken, the faint trail still visible in the snow. If she could get the pups to safety, maybe then she could come back with help for their mother. But another thought pressed at her. The village. What would they say if she brought wolf pups into her home? She already knew the answer. Wolves were the enemy, killers of livestock, thieves of the winter stores. No one would believe that this animal had done nothing but protect her young. They would demand the pups be taken from her, maybe even killed. And the mother, Clara shuddered. The hunters would never let her live. Her eyes burned with tears, hot even in the freezing air. "I can't let them hurt you," she whispered. The wolf shifted, her breathing ragged. She pressed her muzzle against one of the pups, nudging it toward Clara, as though she understood the girl's dilemma. Clara gasped softly, realizing what the animal was asking of her. The wolf couldn't save her children anymore, but she could give them a chance through the strange, small human kneeling in the snow. Clara's decision was made in an instant. She bundled the 3 pups inside her scarf, close to her body for warmth. They whimpered softly but did not resist. She looked back at the wolf, who lay with her head lowered, watching. "I'll come back for you," Clara promised. Her voice trembled, but the words felt like truth. The journey back was harder than Clara expected. The snow was deep, her breath came in ragged bursts, and every step seemed heavier than the last. But she clutched the pups against her chest, feeling their fragile warmth, and it gave her strength. She stumbled, fell once to her knees, but rose again, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. At the edge of the village, she hesitated. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the sound of voices carried on the wind. If anyone saw her with wolf pups hidden in her scarf, there would be questions she couldn't answer. Her heart pounded. She ducked behind a stack of wood and peered toward her home. Her mother was outside, shaking a rug into the snow. Clara froze, clutching the pups tighter. She had never lied to her mother before, never kept a secret this big. But if she told her the truth, what would happen to the tiny lives she held? Her mother turned and went back inside, leaving the yard empty. Clara seized the moment. She slipped through the back door and closed it softly behind her. The warmth of the fire washed over her, and the pups stirred, pressing weakly against her chest. She hurried to her small room, laying them gently on a blanket. Their eyes were still closed, their tiny paws twitching as they whimpered for warmth. Clara tucked another blanket over them, her heart aching at how fragile they looked. She sat back, her mind spinning. She had saved them for now, but what about tomorrow? The villagers would notice. Someone would hear the pups crying or see her sneaking food, and their mother, the wolf still lying in the snow, waiting. How long could she survive without her children, without help? Clara pressed her hands together and whispered into the firelight, "Please let me find a way." She knew this was only the beginning, but in the shadows of her room, the pups whimpered and wriggled closer together, alive because of her. And somewhere out in the frozen forest, a wolf lay waiting for her promise to be kept. Clara barely slept that night. Every time her eyes fluttered closed, a soft whimper pulled her back awake. The 3 tiny pups stirred restlessly under the blanket, their small bodies searching for the warmth of the mother they had been torn from. Clara sat cross-legged beside them, whispering lullabies her own mother used to sing, hoping the rhythm of her voice might calm them. Sometimes it worked for a few minutes, but soon they whimpered again, and each sound tore at Clara's heart. The fire in her room burned low. She dared not take the pups into the main room where her mother slept, wrapped in quilts. The risk was too great. If anyone discovered what she had brought into the house, the secret would end before it had begun. She pressed her ear against the thin wall, listening for footsteps, but the only sounds were the slow crackle of wood and the wind pressing against the shutters. When morning came, Clara faced a new problem. The pups would need food. Their cries grew sharper, their tiny mouths opening as if in search of milk. Clara chewed her lip until it hurt. She had no idea how to feed them. In the kitchen, she stole a bowl of warm milk, dipping the edge of a cloth into it and letting the pups suckle. They struggled at first, mewling, but eventually their small tongues worked at the soaked fabric, and a fragile peace settled over the room. Clara exhaled with relief. But even as she watched them feed, her mind returned to the forest. She had promised the mother wolf she would return. What if the snow had grown deeper? What if hunters had passed by and found her lying there? Clara's stomach twisted with guilt. The wolf's golden eyes had not been fearful. They had been trusting. Clara had carried away her children, and the mother was still waiting in the cold. By midday, her mother noticed her strange behavior. "Clara, why do you keep slipping off to your room?" she asked, folding laundry near the fire. "You've hardly touched your bread." Clara forced a smile and muttered something about being tired. Her mother frowned but let it go. Still, Clara knew her time was running short. Secrets had a way of surfacing quickly in a small village. That evening, Clara wrapped herself in her cloak again. She slipped scraps of meat into a pouch, ignoring the guilt that pinched her chest. Her mother thought the stew pot would feed them for 3 nights, but tonight it would have to feed a starving wolf as well. She checked once more on the pups. They slept, their bellies round from the milk, and whispered, "I'll be back." The forest was colder than before, the snow crunching beneath her boots like brittle glass. Clara hurried, following the trail she remembered, her breath puffing in short bursts. Each step felt heavier with dread. What if the wolf had died? What if her body was frozen, the snow already covering her like a grave? Clara's throat tightened. She pushed faster. When she reached the hollow, her heart nearly stopped. The wolf still lay there, half buried, her chest rising with faint breaths. Her eyes opened slowly at Clara's approach, and a weak sound rumbled from her throat, not a growl, but a recognition. Clara dropped to her knees, tears springing to her eyes. "I came back. I kept my promise." She set the pouch down and pulled out the scraps of meat, laying them carefully in front of the wolf. The animal sniffed, then, with effort, lifted her head enough to eat. Clara watched, her heart pounding. Each bite seemed to restore a sliver of strength. The wolf's ears twitched, her eyes flicking back toward the trees as if listening for the pups. Clara's chest ached at the longing in that gaze. "I have them," Clara whispered. "They're safe. I'll bring them when I can. But you must live. Please live." The wolf lowered her head again, resting against the snow. Clara stroked her muzzle lightly, surprised when the animal didn't pull away. For a moment, they simply breathed together, child and predator, bound by an unspoken pact. A sharp crack of a branch made Clara freeze. Voices carried faintly through the trees, 2 men laughing harshly, the tone unmistakable. Hunters. Clara's pulse hammered. If they came this way, they would see everything. The weak wolf, the scraps of food, the tracks leading from village to den. Panic surged, but so did resolve. Clara sprang to her feet, brushing snow over the scraps to hide them. She bent close to the wolf and whispered, "Stay quiet. I'll protect you." She darted behind a fallen log just as the hunters appeared, their rifles slung across their backs. One pointed to the snow. "Tracks," he said gruffly. "Fresh." They followed the path Clara herself had made, but the falling dusk blurred the edges. They muttered curses about wasted time, then turned toward the ridge. Clara didn't breathe until their voices faded completely. When she returned to the wolf, the animal's eyes were still on her, steady and unblinking. Clara knelt again, her small hand brushing against fur as she whispered, "I won't let them find you. I promise." By the time she made it back to the village, night had fallen. She slipped through the door, her boots soaked, her cheeks flushed from cold. Her mother glanced up, suspicion in her eyes. "Clara, where have you been? You look half frozen," Clara stammered, fumbling for words. But the pups whimpered from her room before she could answer. Her mother's brow furrowed. "What was that?" Clara's heart lurched. The secret was unraveling faster than she'd feared. Her mother's head snapped toward Clara's room. The sound had been faint, just a soft whimper, but in the stillness of their small house it was unmistakable. Clara froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. "What was that?" her mother repeated, her voice sharper this time. She set the folded laundry aside and started toward the door. Clara rushed forward, blocking her path with arms spread wide. "It's nothing, just the wind through the shutters." Her mother frowned. "Wind doesn't cry like that, Clara." She pushed past her, her steps quick and determined. Clara scrambled after her, whispering frantic pleas under her breath, but it was too late. The blanket in Clara's room shifted just as her mother opened the door. 3 tiny muzzles poked out, their eyes still closed, their bodies trembling as they whimpered again. For a moment, silence crushed the room. Then her mother gasped, staggering back as if she had seen a snake coiled at her feet. "Wolves!" Her voice cracked with shock, then hardened into anger. "Clara, what have you done?" Clara stood frozen, her throat dry. She had imagined this moment 100 times in her mind, but none of her rehearsed words seemed enough now. They were going to die," she whispered. "I couldn't leave them." Her mother's hands trembled as she pointed to the pups. "Do you understand what you've brought into this house? If the villagers find out, they'll take them and kill them. And the mother, if she's alive, she'll come for them." "No!" Clara cried, stepping between her mother and the blanket. "She won't hurt us. She's not like they say. She's weak and she's waiting for them. She trusts me." Her mother's expression twisted, torn between fear and disbelief. "Trusts you? Clara, it's a wolf. Wolves don't trust. They kill." Clara's voice wavered but did not break. Then why didn't she? I was right there, next to her. She let me take them. She let me touch her. If she wanted to hurt me, she could have. But she didn't. She only wanted me to save her children. The words hung in the air, fragile and desperate. Her mother's chest rose and fell as she stared at her daughter. She saw not a reckless child, but a trembling girl with eyes full of fire, clutching at something she couldn't explain but couldn't let go. Finally, her mother whispered, "Do you have any idea what danger you've put us in?" Clara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know, but I couldn't walk away. I promised her I would help." Her mother sank onto the edge of the bed, covering her face with her hands. For a long while, she said nothing. The pups whimpered again, and Clara gently tucked the blanket tighter around them, her fingers tender. The small sounds filled the silence like a question neither of them could answer. At last, her mother lowered her hands. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Clara, if anyone finds out, they'll call us traitors to the village. The hunters already hate the wolves. They'll think we're feeding the enemy. Do you understand what that means?" Clara nodded again, but her chin lifted with stubborn resolve. "Then we won't tell anyone. Please, Mama, just until they're stronger, just until their mother can take them back. If we hide them, no one has to know." Her mother shook her head slowly, torn between fear and the sight of her daughter's pleading face. "You're asking me to risk everything, our safety, our home, for animals that should never have been here. They're not just animals," Clara whispered. "They're her children, like I'm yours." The words struck deep. Her mother's lips parted, but no sound came. She looked at Clara, at the way she shielded the pups with her small body, at the tears streaking her cheeks. In that moment, she saw something she could not deny, the same fierce love she herself felt as a mother. Finally, she exhaled a long, shuddering breath. "You'll have to be careful, more careful than you've ever been. No one can see them, Clara, not even our neighbors. Do you hear me?" Relief flooded Clara so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. She threw her arms around her mother's waist. "I hear you, I promise." Her mother's hand lingered on her daughter's back, but her eyes stayed fixed on the pups, troubled and wary. She knew this secret could not last forever. Already, the hunters prowled the forest, hungry for signs of wolves. Already, the village murmured of lost livestock and danger in the snow. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed the tracks Clara had left. That night, Clara lay curled beside the pups, their tiny bodies pressed close to her chest. Her mother sat awake by the fire, staring into the flames, listening to every sound beyond the walls. She had agreed to Clara's promise, but in her heart, she feared it was only the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous than either of them understood. In the forest, beneath a sky heavy with stars, the mother wolf raised her head weakly from the snow. Her ears twitched at the distant cries of her pups, her body trembled, but her eyes burned with a fierce, unyielding will. She would not stop waiting. And when the hunters found her trail, as they surely would, the fragile peace Clara had built would shatter in an instant. By the end of the week, whispers began to creep through the village like smoke through cracks. A farmer swore his chickens had vanished, leaving only paw prints in the snow. Another insisted he had heard howls closer than ever before, echoing from the ridge above the valley. The hunters sat in the tavern with mugs of ale, their voices harsh as they bragged about how soon they would finish what others had failed to do, rid the valley of wolves once and for all. Clara listened from the corner as she carried a basket of bread for her mother. She kept her head low, her scarf pulled tight, hoping the hunters would not notice the way her hands trembled. She knew the truth. Those prints did not belong to marauding wolves. They belonged to her, sneaking out at night with scraps of food for the injured mother still lying in the snow. Every word they spoke pressed against her chest like a stone. At home, the pups had grown stronger. Their eyes had begun to open, cloudy blue at first, blinking at the dim light of Clara's room. They wobbled on unsteady legs, tumbling over each other as they whimpered and yipped softly. Clara's heart swelled each time one of them clambered into her lap, nudging her hand for warmth. They were alive because of her, but their growing voices meant greater danger. Twice already her mother had shushed Clara sharply when a neighbor stopped by, and once she had nearly spilled a basket of laundry in panic when the butcher's wife lingered too close to the back door. "You can't keep this up forever," her mother warned one night as they sat by the fire. Her face was drawn with worry, her hands clasped tight in her lap. "Soon someone will hear them, and when they do, they'll come with ropes and spears, not just for the pups, Clara, for us too." Clara shook her head, stubborn. I'll find a way. I have to. They're depending on me. Her mother sighed, brushing her daughter's hair back from her face. You're too young to carry the weight of the whole forest. But Clara already felt the weight, heavy and immovable. Each night she slipped out, carrying meat wrapped in cloth, following the faint trail through the trees to where the mother wolf still lay. The animal was stronger now, able to lift her head and shift her body, though her legs trembled when she tried to rise. When Clara arrived, she always lifted her muzzle, golden eyes locking onto the girls as if to say, "You kept your word." Clara spoke softly as she laid the food down. "They're safe. They're growing. Soon, I'll bring them back." Yet danger pressed closer with every visit. One evening, as Clara knelt beside the wolf, the crunch of footsteps startled her. She ducked low, her heart hammering, and peered through the branches. 2 hunters trudged past, rifles slung across their shoulders. One of them paused, squatting to inspect the snow. "Tracks," he muttered. "Small ones. Maybe a fox. Or a girl." He chuckled. "No fox wears boots." Clara's stomach turned to ice. She held her breath, terrified the pounding of her heart would give her away. The other hunter snorted. "Forget it. Kids wander, but wolves don't wait long. If they're near, we'll find them." When they moved on, Clara's legs nearly gave out. She pressed her face into the wolf's fur, whispering, "I can't let them catch you, I won't." Back in the village, the suspicion deepened. Neighbors began warning one another to keep children close, to double-lock barns and pens. The butcher complained loudly that someone had been stealing scraps from his bins, never guessing it was Clara's small hands that carried the food away. Then, one afternoon, the younger hunter, kind-eyed and quieter than the rest, appeared at Clara's door. Her mother stiffened when she saw him. "Is something wrong?" she asked cautiously. He glanced toward Clara, then back at her mother. "The men are restless. They're saying a child's been wandering into the forest, leaving strange tracks. If that's true, it's dangerous. Wolves don't care if you're 10 or 20, they'll take what they can." Clara's cheeks burned, but she kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Her mother forced a smile. "Clara has been here. You know how people talk when they're frightened." The hunter nodded slowly, though his eyes lingered on Clara longer than she liked. "Keep her close. The others won't be gentle if they think she's been hiding something." When he left, Clara's mother turned on her, her voice sharp with fear. "Do you see? They're watching us already. If you're caught, Clara, if they even suspect, you'll doom us all." Clara's lips trembled, but she whispered, "I can't stop now. She's waiting. They're waiting." Her mother's shoulders sagged. She looked older in that moment, worn by worry. Then God help us both. That night, Clara sat with the pups pressed against her chest, their tiny bodies warm beneath the blanket. Outside, the howls of the pack carried on the wind, low, mournful, and far too close. In the tavern, the hunters sharpened blades and spoke of setting traps near the ridge. And in the forest, the mother wolf struggled to her feet for the first time, her eyes fixed on the path her children had taken, her heart refusing to yield to the snow. The fragile balance Clara had built was crumbling. One wrong step, one careless sound, and the secret she guarded so fiercely would be torn into the open. The following days were a blur of tension, every hour wound tight like a bowstring. Clara could feel it in the way villagers glanced at one another, in the hushed whispers outside the bakery, in the hunters' grim silence as they patrolled the edge of the forest. The wolves were no longer just a rumor, they were being hunted again. On the 3rd morning she overheard them from behind the stable wall. The scarred hunter, the loudest of them all, slammed his fist against a wooden post. "We've seen the tracks too many times now, always near the ridge. They're circling us, testing. I say we set the traps tonight and bait them with meat." Another voice answered, rough and eager. "And the pup tracks? Too small for foxes." "They're there, all right. If we catch the young, the mother will follow." Clara's blood ran cold. They had found the trail of the pups. She clutched the stable wall so hard her fingers ached, her heart battering her ribs. If they found where she had walked, if they followed the same winding path she had made night after night, they would find the den. They would find her. That evening, Clara slipped back into the forest with the pups' cries still ringing in her ears. She moved quickly, dragging a branch behind her to blur her tracks, her breath shallow and panicked. The sky was iron gray, heavy with the threat of snow. She reached the hollow where the wolf lay and dropped to her knees. The mother wolf was stronger now. Her body still bore the weight of hunger and frost. but her head lifted with more force, her golden eyes alert and searching. When she saw Clara, her ears flicked forward, and she gave a soft, rumbling sound deep in her chest. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "They've seen your trail," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the wolf's fur. "They want to trap you. They'll come tonight." The wolf blinked slowly as though she understood, and Clara felt her resolve harden. She couldn't just hide anymore. She had to act. She pulled scraps of meat from her pouch and laid them on a stone, but this time she didn't linger to watch her eat. Instead, she ran to the ridge where the hunters would surely come and began to lay false tracks. With each step, she angled her boots differently, dragging sticks across the snow to mimic larger paws. She circled in loops, then cut away sharply, her small hands raw from gripping the branch she dragged. By the time she was done, the ground was a maze of confusion, trails that led nowhere. Her lungs burned by the time she stumbled back to the hollow. The wolf lay watching her, her breath misting in the cold air. Clara sank to the ground, exhausted. "I hope it's enough," she murmured. That night, as darkness thickened, the hunters entered the forest. Clara knew because she could hear them, boots crunching, voices low but sharp. From her hiding place among the branches, she saw their torches flickering through the trees. Her stomach clenched. "They've been here," one muttered, pointing at the snow. "Look at the prints." Another squatted, tracing a gloved hand along the ground. "Strange, as if they turned back on themselves." "Doesn't matter," the scarred hunter growled. "Follow them. Wolves are clever, but not clever enough." Clara bit her lip to keep from crying out. Her traps were working, but the hunters were relentless. They followed the false paths deeper, their voices fading into the distance. Clara let out a shaky breath of relief until she realized one of them had stayed behind, the younger hunter. He stood near the hollow, his lantern casting long shadows across the snow. He was silent, scanning the ground with careful eyes. Unlike the others, he wasn't fooled by loops and branches. His gaze lifted suddenly, and for a terrifying moment, it locked directly on Clara's hiding place. She froze, her whole body trembling. Then, instead of calling out, the young man looked away. He turned his lantern toward the ridge, deliberately following the others. His voice carried softly, almost as if meant for her ears alone. "Tracks go this way," he said, and then he was gone. Clara sagged against the tree, tears spilling down her cheeks. Someone knew. Someone had chosen to let her go. When the hunters were finally gone, she crept back to the wolf inn, who lifted her head with a questioning rumble. Clara knelt, stroking her muzzle. "We bought time," she whispered, "but they'll come again, stronger. I have to find a way to keep you safe, all of you." Back in the village, the pups stirred restlessly in their hidden nest. Her mother sat by the fire, hands clasped so tight her knuckles whitened, listening for every sound outside the house. She knew her daughter's secret was hanging by a thread, and in the forest, under the cloak of night, the scarred hunter swore that tomorrow, with more men and sharper steel, he would bring back proof of the wolves. Clara's fight was only beginning. The morning after the failed hunt, the village buzzed like a hive struck by a stick. Hunters stomped through the square, muttering about vanishing tracks and trickery in the snow. Some swore the wolves were mocking them, circling unseen. Others whispered of spirits protecting the beasts. Fear and frustration twined together, sharp as wire. Clara kept her head low as she carried firewood from the shed to her mother. Each step felt heavy with the memory of last night, the false trails, the torches in the forest, the young hunter's eyes meeting hers in the dark. He had seen her. She was sure of it, yet he had looked away, sending the others in the wrong direction. Why? By midday, the younger hunter stood at the well, filling a bucket. His gaze lifted when Clara approached with a jug. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a low voice, he said, "The tracks last night, they weren't wolves." Clara's throat closed. Her fingers tightened on the jug. She forced herself to shrug. "Maybe the snow played tricks on you." His eyes, steady and piercing, did not waver. "Snow doesn't wear boots." Her heart lurched. She turned quickly, but his hand, gentle yet firm, touched her sleeve. "I'm not going to tell them," he whispered. "But I need to know why." Clara looked up at him, torn between fear and the burning need to defend what she loved. She lowered her voice to a breath. "They were dying, the pups, and their mother. She trusted me. If I leave them, the hunters will kill them all." For a long moment he said nothing. His jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. Then he released her sleeve and glanced around to make sure no one was near. You've put yourself in more danger than you know. If the others find out..." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. That evening, Clara's mother noticed her daughter's restlessness. "What did he say to you?" she asked. Her knitting needles paused mid-air. Clara hesitated. "He knows," she admitted. "But he didn't tell." Her mother's face went pale. "Clara, that boy holds your life in his hands now. If he changes his mind..." "He won't," Clara said quickly, though a tremor ran through her words. "He looked at me the way the wolf did, like he understood." Her mother set the needles down, her eyes filling with worry. "Understanding isn't enough to protect you when the whole village is against you." That night, Clara returned to the den with more scraps. The wolf was standing now, unsteady but upright, her breath misting in the freezing air. When Clara approached, she lowered her head, brushing her muzzle against the girl's hand in quiet recognition. Clara smiled through tears. "You're getting stronger. Soon you'll walk with them again." But as she knelt, the crunch of snow behind her froze her blood. She spun around, and there he was, the young hunter. His lantern swung low, casting golden light across the clearing. His eyes flicked from Clara to the wolf, and for a heartbeat, she thought he might raise his rifle. Instead, he lowered it. "You weren't lying," he murmured. "Or not accusation," colored his voice. "She's letting you touch her." Clara stood protectively in front of the wolf, her arms spread. "Please don't tell them. They'll kill her. They'll kill the pups." He shook his head slowly, stepping closer. "I've hunted wolves since I was younger than you. I've never seen one like this, never seen mercy in their eyes." He looked at Clara, his voice lowering to a whisper. "You've changed her, or she's changed you. Maybe both." Clara's chest loosened, but fear still gnawed at her. "Will you help me keep them safe?" The young hunter hesitated, glancing back toward the path that led to the village. "If I do, I'll be branded a traitor. The scarred hunter already thinks I'm soft. If he suspects..." He trailed off, then looked back at Clara, his jaw tightening. "But if I don't, you'll be destroyed, and so will she." For a long moment, only the sound of the wolf's breath filled the clearing. Then he nodded once. "I'll help, but you must be careful. The village won't forgive us if they find out." Relief crashed over Clara, so strong it made her dizzy. She threw her arms around him before she could think. He stiffened, startled, then awkwardly patted her shoulder. "All right," he muttered. "All right." When she pulled back, her eyes shone. "Then we have to move fast. The others are setting traps. If she walks into one, I'll find where they've set them," he promised. "I'll warn you. But Clara, you need to be ready. The scarred hunter won't stop. He'd rather burn the forest than lose his pride." Clara looked back at the wolf, who watched them both with golden eyes. "Then we'll protect her together." In the village, suspicion continued to spread. Neighbors whispered about missing scraps of food, about strange sounds at night. The scarred hunter's voice grew louder in the tavern, rallying men to his cause. "The wolves are close. I smell their stink on the wind. When we find them, we end it for good." But now Clara was not alone. For the first time, she had an ally, one who knew the danger and who saw the truth and who was willing to risk everything. The battle for the wolves' survival and for Clara's fragile secret was no longer hers alone. And soon, the clash between mercy and fear would tear the valley apart. The scarred hunter's pride had become a wound that refused to heal. Each time he returned empty-handed, each rumor that the wolves had slipped away again festered like poison in his chest. In the tavern, his voice rose above the crackle of the hearth, sharp as a blade. "No more games, no more half measures. Tonight, we end this." Men gathered close, drawn by his fury. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling mugs. "I know where their den lies. We've circled long enough. We burn them out before the thaw, when they're weakest. Fire, steel, traps, whatever it takes. If we wait, the beasts will grow bold, and soon we'll have children dragged from doorsteps." His words struck fear like sparks into dry tinder. Several men nodded grimly, though others looked away, doubt flickering in their eyes. Clara overheard the plan not from his mouth, but from the young hunter who came to her door as dusk deepened. His face was pale, his voice urgent. "He's gathering them tonight. Not just a few men, half the hunters in the valley. They're marching to the ridge." Clara's stomach dropped. Her hands clutched the doorframe until her knuckles whitened. "Then she's dead," she whispered. "They'll kill her before she can even rise." "Not if we move first," the young hunter said. He glanced over his shoulder as if afraid the very walls had ears. "I can't hold them back forever. But if you and I reach the den before they do, maybe we can..." He stopped himself. searching her face. "Clara, this is madness. If we're caught, they'll call us traitors." Clara shook her head, eyes blazing. "I'd rather be a traitor than stand by while they slaughter her and her children." The young hunter stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "Then let's go." They slipped into the forest under a sky smothered in clouds. Snow muffled their steps, but their hearts pounded loud in their ears. Clara carried a bundle of scraps and a small lantern tucked beneath her cloak. The hunter carried nothing but his rifle, though the way his hands gripped the stock made Clara wonder if he meant to use it at all. The den appeared through the trees like a wound in the earth, half covered in drifted snow. The wolf was there, standing now, though her body still trembled with weakness. Her golden eyes flared when she saw Clara, and a low rumble rose in her chest, not in warning, but in recognition. Clara rushed forward, kneeling, her hands brushing the wolf's muzzle. "They're coming," she whispered. "You have to move. You can't stay here." The wolf's ears twitched, and she shifted her weight uneasily. The young hunter stood a few paces back, watching in awe. "I've seen animals fight to protect their dens, but never one. Listening." He shook his head. "It's as if she knows you." "She does," Clara said fiercely. "And she knows they'll kill her if she stays." A sound split the night, a distant shout carried by the wind, then another, closer. Torches flickered between the trees, growing brighter. The hunters were coming. "Go," the young hunter urged. He moved to the wolf's side, gesturing toward a narrow path that cut toward the river. "If she can walk, lead her there. The current's strong, but it'll cover the scent." Clara tugged gently at the wolf's fur. "Please," she begged, "for your children, move." With a heave of effort, the wolf stepped forward, her paws sinking into the snow. Her body wavered, but Clara was there, her small frame steadying her as if her will alone could hold the beast upright. Together they staggered toward the riverbank, the young hunter breaking branches behind them to confuse the trail. The torches drew closer. Voices rang out, angry, eager, hungry for blood. "There! Tracks! Fresh!" Clara's pulse hammered. She could feel the heat of the torches even before the glow reached them. The wolf stumbled once, nearly falling, but Clara pressed against her flank, whispering, "One more step, just one more." They reached the river as the first hunters broke into the clearing. Flames lit the snow, casting long shadows. The scarred hunter's voice bellowed, "There! The witch child and the beast!" Clara's heart stopped. They had been seen. The wolf growled low, her hackles rising, but Clara threw her arms around her neck. "Don't fight!" she cried. "They'll kill you if you fight." The young hunter raised his rifle, not at the wolf, but high into the air. He fired, the crack splitting the night. Startled, the hunters flinched, some dropping back. Smoke curled from the barrel as he shouted, "She's leading them away! The den is empty!" For a moment, confusion rippled through the men. Some argued. Others pointed at Clara's small form by the wolf. The scarred hunter roared above them all, "Lies! She's protecting it! Seize them!" But before they could surge forward, the wolf leapt into the river with a splash, Clara clinging to her fur. The icy current swallowed them both, sweeping them downstream. The young hunter fired again, forcing the men to scatter back from the bank. "Too late!" he shouted. "They're gone!" The scarred hunter cursed, his face twisted with rage. "Then we follow the river until we find their bodies." But the current was swift, carrying Clara and the wolf far beyond the torchlight, into the dark belly of the valley where neither fire nor fury could reach. As she clung to the wolf's wet fur, gasping, shivering, Clara knew this was only a reprieve. The scarred hunter would not stop. The village would demand answers. And sooner or later, she would have to choose between hiding forever or standing openly for the bond she had forged in the snow. The river carried them farther than Clara thought possible. Her small body clung desperately to the wolf's sodden fur, the icy water numbing her fingers and burning her lungs with each gasp. Branches whipped past, snowmelt stung her face, and for one terrifying moment she thought she would be swept under. But the wolf swam with desperate strength, each stroke pulling them away from the torchlight and shouts fading behind them. At last, the current slowed near a bend where the trees arched low over the bank. The wolf dragged herself ashore, panting heavily, her fur matted with ice. Clara collapsed beside her, trembling violently, her cloak plastered to her skin. For long minutes they lay in silence, broken only by the wolf's ragged breaths and the river's gurgle. Clara pushed herself up, teeth chattering. We made it," she whispered, though her lips were nearly too numb to form the words. She pulled the blanket she'd stuffed in her pack before leaving the house and draped it over the wolf's shoulders, then wrapped herself tightly in the remaining scraps of cloth. The wolf's golden eyes flicked toward her, tired but alive. They needed shelter. Clara scanned the dark forest, then spotted a hollow beneath a leaning pine where roots tangled to form a shallow cave. She coaxed the wolf there, hauling branches and fir needles to make a bed. When the animal curled into it, Clara tucked herself against her flank, soaking up what warmth she could. She knew it was only a temporary haven. By morning, the hunters would be combing the forest. Back in the village, chaos was already spreading. The men returned at dawn soaked and furious, the scarred hunter spitting rage at anyone who dared meet his eye. "She's bewitched them," he snarled in the square, his voice raw. "That girl, Clara, she led the beast to safety. I saw it with my own eyes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children closer. Some whispered in disbelief, others nodded grimly, fear swallowing reason. Clara's mother stood in the doorway of their small home, her face pale as ash. Neighbors gathered around her, voices sharp with accusation. "Where is she?" one demanded. "Where's your daughter?" "She was with me last night," her mother lied quickly, forcing a steady voice she did not feel. "She hasn't left my side." But suspicion thickened like smoke. The scarred hunter stormed forward, pointing a finger at her. "Lies! I saw her by the river. She clung to the beast's neck as if it were her kin. Do you deny it?" Her mother's heart hammered. She met his gaze with quiet defiance. "I deny nothing I haven't seen with my own eyes. You see monsters where a child sees suffering. That says more about you than her." The crowd erupted, some shouting agreement, others cursing her. The prefect raised his voice, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. The valley was split. Half believed Clara was a reckless child who had endangered them all. The other half whispered that maybe, just maybe, the wolves were not the demons they'd been told. Meanwhile, Clara huddled deeper into the pine hollow with the wolf, her stomach knotted. She thought of her mother, alone against the anger of the village, and tears pricked her eyes. "I should be there," she whispered. "They'll blame you." "They'll blame me." The wolf nudged her gently with her muzzle, a soft huff of breath misting the air. Clara pressed her face into the thick fur, drawing strength from the quiet, steady presence. As dawn broke fully, the pups stirred in their hidden nest back at the house. Clara's mother fed them warm milk, her hands shaking. Each tiny whimper was a dagger of fear. If the neighbors heard, if the hunters pushed through the door, it would all unravel. She hushed them softly, praying for silence, praying for her daughter's safety. By midday, the young hunter slipped away from the mob and made his way to Clara's house. He knocked softly, and when her mother opened the door, relief flashed across his face. "She's alive," he whispered quickly. "I saw her tracks by the river. She's hiding, somewhere east." Her mother sagged against the doorframe, eyes brimming. "Thank God." But the young man's expression darkened. "The scarred one won't stop. He's rallying more men tonight. He wants Clara brought back in chains to prove she's guilty. If they find her before we do." Her mother pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back a cry. "Then you must find her first. Please, bring her back to me." The young hunter nodded. "I'll try, but know this. The valley is tearing itself apart. She's not just a girl anymore. To some, she's a savior. To others, she's a curse." That night, Clara watched the stars flicker through the branches, the wolf's steady breath a lull beside her. She thought of the pups waiting for her return, of her mother standing alone against the hunters, of the young man who had risked everything to protect her. Fear gnawed at her, but so did a growing flame of determination. "They think you're monsters," she whispered to the wolf, "but I know better. And if I have to stand against them all, I will." In the village square, the scarred hunter raised his torch to the sky. "Tonight," he roared, "we end the lies. Tonight, we drag the witch child and her wolves into the light." The crowd's roar answered him, half in fury, half in doubt. The valley stood on the edge of a reckoning, and in the hollow of the forest, Clara held the wolf's gaze and knew the storm was coming straight for them. By the next morning, the village no longer spoke in whispers. The divide that had grown in secret now stood in the open, raw and unyielding. Men shouted in the square, women argued at the well, even children repeated the words they had heard at home. Some called Clara a curse, a reckless child who had chosen beasts over her own people. Others defended her, claiming she was a gift, that the wolves had spared her because she carried something pure the valley had forgotten. The prefect tried to calm the storm, but his voice was drowned in the din. "We cannot decide in anger. he cried. "We must hear all sides." But the scarred hunter's voice roared louder, fueled by his humiliation. "Sides? There are no sides. The girl betrayed us. She led the beast to safety while we stood ready to protect our homes. If we don't act now, she'll bring the pack to our doors." A cheer rose from his followers, their faces twisted with rage. "Bring her back! Chain her! Burn the den!" they shouted. But another group surged forward, just as fierce. Mothers, farmers, even some of the younger men who had seen the wolves' restraint. "She saved them!" a woman cried, her voice breaking. "I saw her with the pups. They were helpless, no different from our own children." Others nodded, clutching rosaries, muttering prayers that the valley would choose mercy over fear. The square erupted in a shouting match, insults flying. "Traitors! Murderers! She's just a child. She's bewitched." The air crackled with fury. In the midst of it all, Clara's mother stood at her doorstep, pale and silent. She clutched her shawl tightly, listening as her neighbors screamed for her daughter's blood. When one woman sneered, "You raised a monster," her mother finally snapped. "You call her a monster?" she shouted, her voice ringing clear. "She risked her life to save the helpless. She showed more courage than all of you, hiding behind your fear." Her voice shook, but the fire in her eyes silenced many. For a heartbeat, the square stilled. Then the scarred hunter pointed at her with a shaking hand. "She admits it. She hides the girl and the beasts in her home, sees her until the child is found." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Some surged forward, ready to drag her away. Others stepped in front of her, blocking the way. "You'll not lay a hand on her," the younger hunter growled, rifle slung over his shoulder but his stance firm, his eyes locked on the scarred man. "Not while I draw breath." The crowd fractured further, fists clenched. A few stones were thrown, skittering across the cobblestones. The prefect shouted for order, but no one listened anymore. The valley was no longer arguing. It was preparing to fight itself. Far away in the forest, Clara felt the tremor of that division even without hearing the words. She fed the wolf scraps from her bundle, her small hands steady despite her fear. "They're arguing about us," she whispered. "About me. Some want to hurt you, some want to help. And I don't know which side will win." The wolf's golden eyes met hers, calm and unreadable. Clara rested her forehead against the animal's muzzle, drawing strength from the steady breath. "If they comes, I'll stand with you," she vowed. "I won't let them take you." Back in the village, the tension finally snapped. A scuffle broke out in the square, one man swinging at another, shouts turning to screams as the crowd broke into two sides. Some rushed to the tavern to fetch weapons, others dragged family members indoors to safety. The prefect, his face ashen, raised his hands in desperation. "Stop this madness! You're tearing us apart!" But his words drowned beneath the chaos. By dusk, the village was unrecognizable. Torches flared on both sides of the square, one side rallying around the scarred hunter, the other gathering quietly near the church, whispering prayers for Clara and the wolves. The line was drawn, fear against mercy, vengeance against hope. The young hunter stood at the center, torn. He knew if he chose wrong, he would lose everything, his place among the men, the trust of his people. But when he thought of Clara's small hands pressed against the wolf's fur, of the way she had cried, "They trusted me," his choice became clear. He walked away from the scarred hunter's torchlit mob and toward the quiet group near the church. His rifle stayed slung across his back, but his loyalty was no longer hidden. "Where are you going?" one of the hunters snarled after him. He turned, his voice steady. "To protect the only one among us brave enough to do what's right." Gasps rose. Some shouted curses. Others murmured in approval, the scarred hunter's face twisted with rage. "Then you're a traitor too," he bellowed. The young man didn't flinch. "If mercy is treason, then I'll wear it proudly." The valley had chosen its battlefield, not in the forest where the wolves waited, but in the hearts of its own people. And Clara, still hidden in the pines, had no idea that her name had become the spark of a war. The valley split wide open that night. Torches lit one half of the square, casting jagged shadows on angry faces. The other half huddled near the church, candles glowing faint but steady, their murmured prayers swallowed by the roar of the crowd. The scarred hunter stood tall on the steps of the tavern, his voice raw from shouting, his fist raised high. "Enough waiting," he bellowed. "While we argue, the beasts breed and the witch child feeds them. Tomorrow there will be twice as many, and the next day, more. If we don't strike tonight, We'll lose everything." His followers roared back, banging spears on the ground. "Tonight! Tonight!" The prefect's voice broke as he tried to calm them. "If you march in anger, you'll doom us all. The girl, she is only a child." But no one listened. The crowd surged forward, men strapping on belts heavy with knives, others carrying nets and iron traps. Their fury was a tide, and the scarred hunter steered it straight toward the forest. On the church steps, Clara's mother clutched her shawl tight, her face grey with fear. Around her, villagers who believed in her daughter argued heatedly. "We must stop them," one whispered. "If they find Clara first, she won't live to see dawn." Another shook his head, pale. "There are too many. We'll be slaughtered if we stand in their way." The young hunter stepped forward, his rifle slung across his back. His voice carried, clear and steady. "Then we don't face them head-on. We run ahead of them. We reach Clara first." Eyes turned to him, doubt warred with hope in their faces. "Do you even know where she is?" one man demanded. He nodded. "By the river bend, near the pines. I followed her tracks once. If we move fast, we can warn her before the mob arrives." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Clara's mother whispered, "Go, please. Bring her back to me." Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with desperate faith. The young hunter gathered a small band, 5 villagers who still believed Clara was not a curse. They slipped into the night, torches doused, moving quickly along the frozen paths. Their breath came in ragged clouds, their boots crunching softly in the snow. Behind them, the mob thundered into the forest, torches blazing like a fiery serpent winding between the trees. Clara, meanwhile, crouched in the hollow beneath the pine, her arms wrapped around the wolf's neck for warmth. The pups wriggled against her chest, their tiny cries muffled in the folds of her cloak. She had not dared return home. She knew the hunters would be waiting. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but fear pressed harder than emptiness. She felt the storm coming, an invisible weight in the air, thick with dread. The wolf's ears pricked. She rose suddenly, hackles lifting, her golden eyes fixed on the distant ridge. Clara strained to listen, and then she heard it. The faint rumble of many feet, the crack of branches, the echo of voices raised in fury. Torches flickered faintly between the trees. "They're coming," Clara whispered, her chest tightening. Panic surged, but the wolf pressed against her side, steady, grounding. Clara tightened her grip on the pups. "I won't let them take you." The first figure to break through the trees was not the scarred hunter, but the young one. He raised his hand quickly, signaling her to stay quiet. Relief crashed over Clara, so fierce she nearly cried out. He ran to her, dropping to his knees in the snow. "They're on their way," he hissed. "Dozens of them. You have to move now." Clara shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "She can't run. She's still weak. If I leave her, they'll kill her. Then we'll stand with her," he said fiercely. "But you can't face them alone." He motioned, and the small band of villagers stepped into the clearing. Their faces were pale, but their eyes resolute. One carried a lantern, another a sturdy staff. They looked nothing like an army, but they were all Clara had. The wolf shifted, lowering her head, her breath steaming in the frigid air. She did not growl. She did not flee. She only stood between Clara and the oncoming torches, her body a shield. And then the scarred hunter's voice shattered the silence. "There! The witch child and her pack!" Torches blazed as the mob poured into the clearing, iron flashing in their hands. The scarred hunter stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Now, girl," he snarled, "you'll watch your pets die before your eyes." Clara rose to her feet, her small frame trembling but unyielding. The pups whimpered in her cloak, their warmth pressed against her. She looked from the scarred hunter to the sea of faces, some twisted with rage, others uncertain, even afraid. Her voice rang out, thin but clear. "Then you'll have to kill me first." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the crackle of torches and the wolf's low, steady breath. The young hunter moved to stand at her side, rifle raised, his jaw set. Behind him, the handful of villagers lit their lanterns and held them high, their trembling voices calling out, "She's only a child. She's done nothing but protect life." The mob hesitated, fractured by doubt. Some lowered their torches, others gripped them tighter. The scarred hunter's face twisted. "She has bewitched you all," he shouted. "Don't you see? She's the reason the beasts dare walk so close to our homes. If she won't choose us, then she's already chosen them." He raised his spear. The wolf bared her teeth, golden eyes blazing, the pups whimpering against Clara's chest. The clearing bristled with tension, a breath held before the breaking point. The valley had reached the edge of its fate, and with the next heartbeat it would fall either into blood or into mercy. The clearing held its breath, the flames of the hunters' torches dancing on faces twisted by rage and fear. The scarred hunter's spear gleamed as he leveled it, the point aimed straight at the wolf. His voice was ragged, half fury, half triumph. "Stand aside, girl. If you value your life, leave the beasts to us." Clara's chest heaved, but her feet rooted into the snow. She shook her head, her cloak falling open to reveal the 3 pups nestled against her. Their tiny cries carried through the silence, piercing sharper than any blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She's hiding them!" someone shouted. "She's had them all along." Clara's mother pushed to the front, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. "Because they would have died," she cried. Her voice cracked, but it carried. "Because no one else had the heart to see they were just children, helpless, like yours once were." The crowd wavered, torn between the scarred hunter's fury and the raw plea in her words. Some shifted uneasily, lowering their torches. Others snarled, unwilling to be swayed. The scarred hunter roared above them all. "Children, they grow into killers. If we don't end them now, they'll end us." With a sharp thrust, he drove his spear forward. Clara didn't think. She threw herself in front of the wolf, arms spread wide, her small body a shield. The spear's tip stopped inches from her chest as the young hunter lunged, knocking the shaft aside with his rifle. The clash rang out, steel against wood, and chaos erupted. Men surged forward, shouting, some toward Clara, others against the scarred hunter. Fists flew, torches flared, snow churned beneath boots. The wolf lowered her head and growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the ground. But she didn't leap. Instead, she pressed closer to Clara, her body curved protectively around the girl. "Look at her!" Clara screamed, her voice cutting through the noise. She pointed to the wolf with trembling hands. "If she were the monster you say, I'd already be dead. She chose mercy again and again. Why can't you?" Her words hit like stones in still water, rippling outward. For a moment, men faltered mid-swing, their eyes flicking from the girl to the beast. But the scarred hunter would not yield. Foam flecked his lips as he shoved men aside, raising his spear high. "Enough of this witch's lies. Kill them all." Before he could strike, the wolf moved. She stepped forward, placing her massive body squarely between Clara and the mob. Her golden eyes blazed, her breath a cloud in the cold air. With deliberate slowness, she lowered herself to the ground, exposing her vulnerable throat. A stunned silence fell. The beast, who could have torn them apart, lay before them in surrender, not to give up life, but to prove, undeniably, her choice. Clara dropped to her knees beside her, tears streaming down her face. She laid a hand on the wolf's neck and turned to the villagers. "She trusts us, even after everything. What will you choose?" The silence stretched long, broken only by the pups' soft whimpers. Torches sputtered. Some men lowered their weapons, shame flickering in their eyes. The young hunter stepped forward, his rifle held high, not in threat, but as a sign. "I stood with you last night," he said to the mob, his voice steady. "And I tell you now, she speaks the truth. This beast has shown more restraint than we have. If you strike now, it won't be justice, it will be murder." The prefect, who had been shoved aside in the chaos, pushed through the crowd, his robes dusted with snow. His voice trembled but carried, "We stand at a crossroads. If we kill tonight, we kill not only wolves, but what remains of our mercy. If we spare them, we may yet save ourselves." The crowd fractured again. Some muttered angrily, spitting on the snow, their torches still burning, but others dropped their weapons entirely, stepping back with bowed heads. The split was no longer hunters versus defenders. It was fear against the undeniable truth laid bare before them. The scarred hunter's face twisted in rage. "You're fools! She's blinded you all!" He lunged forward one last time, his spear arcing toward Clara. The wolf surged up with a roar that shook the clearing. She struck the shaft with a paw, splintering the wood, the force throwing the scarred hunter onto his back. He scrambled in the snow, his face pale with shock as the beast loomed over him. For one breathless instant, her teeth were inches from his throat. The crowd froze, certain they would see him torn apart. But she didn't strike. She stepped back, growling low, and returned to Clara's side. The scarred hunter's own men recoiled in disgust. One spat on the ground. "Even the beast shows more mercy than you." He turned his back, dragging others with him. The tide had turned. Clara stood shakily, her hand still on the wolf's fur, her voice breaking but strong. She chose mercy. So must we. The villagers lowered their weapons, torches extinguished in the snow. One by one, heads bowed. The scarred hunter was left alone in the center, panting, humiliated, his broken spear lying at his feet. The climax had come, not in blood, but in the moment the valley saw itself reflected in a wolf's golden eyes and realized which side of the reflection it wanted to stand on. The clearing was no longer just a patch of snow between pines. It had become the beating heart of the valley's fate. Villagers ringed it in a jagged circle of torchlight, half shouting for blood, half stunned into silence by what they had just seen. Clara stood in the center, her small figure dwarfed by the towering wolf at her side. The pups pressed against her chest. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, but her voice carried like steel. She had the chance to kill. She spared you. She spared me. If you can't see the truth now, you never will. The scarred hunter rose from the snow, his broken spear clutched in trembling hands. His face was a mask of humiliation and rage, eyes wild. "Don't listen to her. She's bewitched you," he howled. "Mercy is weakness. Weakness gets us all killed." He lunged again, reckless, desperate to reclaim his power, but this time he didn't find an enemy waiting. The young hunter stepped between him and Clara. Rifle raised, not to kill but to block. The barrel pressed against the scarred man's chest. "Enough," the young hunter said, his voice low and final. The mob held its breath. For a heartbeat, it seemed the valley teetered on the edge of tearing itself apart. One wrong move, one cry of violence, and blood would spill into the snow. Then something shifted. From the tree line, more wolves emerged, silent, watchful shapes, their eyes gleaming like lanterns in the dark. They did not advance, did not snarl. They stood in a line, their bodies forming a living wall behind Clara. It was not a threat. It was a message. She is ours, and we have chosen peace, if you will. Mothers in the crowd clutched their children tighter. Farmers dropped their torches into the snow, unable to meet the wolves' eyes. Even hardened hunters lowered their weapons, shaken. The image was undeniable. A pack of predators, not attacking, but standing guard around a human child. The prefect stepped forward, his voice hoarse but steady. "The beasts have shown more restraint than we have. If we strike them now, we prove the girl right, that we are the true monsters." He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. "The choice is ours. Do we answer mercy with mercy, or with murder?" The crowd broke, not with violence but with sobs, mutters, and the clatter of weapons dropped into the snow. One by one, torches dimmed. Some fell to their knees, others simply turned away, unwilling to take another step towards slaughter. Only the scarred hunter remained, trembling with fury. He spat on the ground, his voice bitter. "Fools, you'll regret this when the beasts turn on you." But no one followed him this time. His men had melted back into the crowd, shame clouding their faces. He was alone. Clara lifted her chin, her voice trembling but resolute. "If regret comes, it will be mine to bear. But I will never regret choosing compassion over fear." Her words hung in the night air, simple and sharp as a blade. The scarred hunter dropped his broken spear into the snow and stalked into the trees, his shadow swallowed by the dark. No one called him back. The wolves stood still a moment longer, their golden eyes sweeping over the crowd, then turned and melted into the forest. Only the mother wolf remained, pressing her muzzle gently against Clara's shoulder before following her kin. Clara clutched the pups tighter, watching her disappear into the trees with tears shining in her eyes. The clearing emptied slowly. Villagers walked back toward their homes in silence, their torches extinguished, their hearts heavy with what they had witnessed. No songs, no shouts of victory, only the quiet weight of a lesson learned too late. Clara stayed in the snow until the young hunter touched her shoulder gently. "It's over," he murmured. She shook her head. "No. It's just beginning." Because the valley would never forget the night a little girl stood between hunters and wolves, and mercy prevailed. The valley did not wake the next morning to triumph. It woke to silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy and uneasy, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Snow still blanketed the earth, muffling every sound, but in the hearts of the villagers, something had shifted. The hunters, who had marched out with torches blazing, returned without glory. Their weapons hung useless at their sides. Some could not meet their neighbors' eyes, ashamed of the fury that had blinded them. Others muttered excuses, blaming the scarred hunter who had vanished into the forest like a ghost. But none could deny what they had witnessed. The wolves had chosen peace when they could have chosen blood. At the edge of the square, Clara's mother stood waiting. When she saw her daughter step forward, clutching the pups in her arms, she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Clara," she whispered, gathering the girl and the whimpering bundles against her chest. For the first time in days, relief cracked through her fear. The prefect, weary and shaken, raised his voice to the crowd. "Last night, we stood at the edge of ruin, and it was not strength or steel that saved us, but the courage of a child. Let that be our lesson." His words trembled but rang true. Heads bowed, some in shame, others in reverence. In the weeks that followed, the valley walked a fragile line. The scarred hunter never returned, though rumors swirled that he roamed the mountains still, vowing revenge. But his absence left room for something new. Farmers who once spoke only of traps and bounties now murmured of balance, of leaving the forest to those who had always dwelled there. Clara became a quiet legend even as she lived. Children followed her with wide eyes, whispering that she was the girl the wolves trusted. Mothers clasped her hand in gratitude, though their faces carried guilt for ever doubting her. Some men still muttered darkly, but even they could not deny what they had seen. The beasts had lowered their throats in surrender, and Clara had stood unflinching before their rage. The pups grew quickly in her care, tumbling through the snow outside her home, chasing each other with clumsy joy. Clara's mother fed them from bowls she once swore would never touch a wolf. Every laugh Clara shared with them softened the hard edges of suspicion in the village. Slowly, hearts thawed. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the mountains in fire, Clara walked with the young hunter to the ridge where the forest opened wide. The air was sharp, her breath misting, the pups darting around her feet. For a long while they said nothing, only listening to the wind in the pines. Finally, Clara spoke. "Do you think they'll ever truly forgive me?" The young hunter looked at her, then at the pups tumbling in the snow. "They already have. They just don't know how to admit it yet." He smiled faintly. "In time, they'll tell your story around the fire. Not as a curse, but as proof that courage doesn't always wear armor or carry steel." Clara glanced at him, her cheeks warming despite the cold. "And you? Do you regret helping me?" He shook his head. "Never." From the forest came a sound, low, familiar and powerful. Clara froze, her heart leaping. Between the trees, golden eyes gleamed. The mother wolf stepped into view, stronger now, her coat thick and shining. She stood tall, her gaze fixed on Clara, and behind her, shadows shifted, an entire pack watching silently. The pups yipped, racing toward her, tails wagging furiously. Clara's throat tightened as she watched the reunion. The mother lowered her head, nuzzling each pup, then lifted her gaze back to Clara. For a long moment, girl and wolf held each other's eyes. No fear, no barrier, only recognition. And then the wolf turned, leading her young back into the trees. The pack followed, their shapes melting into the dusk. Clara stood motionless, her chest aching with a mix of sorrow and joy. "They're free now," she whispered. The young hunter touched her shoulder gently. "Because of you." Years later, the valley still told the story. By firesides and in hushed tones, parents told their children of the night when anger nearly consumed them, and how a little girl with nothing but her heart had stopped it. They spoke of wolves who bowed their heads, of mercy that won where steel failed. Clara grew into a woman, but she never forgot the feel of that golden muzzle pressing against her cheek, and whenever she walked near the forest, she swore she saw eyes watching from the shadows, silent, watchful, and kind. The legend lived on, not of monsters, but of a bond between child and beast that taught an entire valley the meaning of courage. And those who heard it wept, not from fear, but from the beauty of knowing mercy had triumphed when all else had failed. If this story moved you, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change everything. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and share this one with someone who needs a reminder of the strength of mercy. And if you'd like to keep watching, here's another video I think you'll love.